Welcome back, Capital F football fans, to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. Today we have our last conference prediction. It is the Big 12. Now stay tuned for our next upload on this channel. We will be going over our predictions for individual awards, and the next week our full postseason preview and week 0 preview. Stay tuned for that. And if you're excited, be sure to like and subscribe. It shows us how much you enjoy the videos. And without further ado, let's get right into the Big 12 conference prediction. At 16, we have the Arizona State Sun Devils. Arizona State really suffered from a lack of consistent quarterback play last year, and while it doesn't seem like a huge step up, Sam Leavitt should at least be a solid fit for the Sun Devils. They also bring in some solid defense depth to help counteract some of the losses they faced on that side of the ball. But the issue we have with Arizona State is they were just absolutely horrible last year in virtually every metric, and we aren't too confident in Kenny Dillingham's ability to turn around a team like Arizona State in his second full season there. We think Arizona State can improve, but it would take a massive improvement in several areas for the Sun Devils to be considerably better overall. This year we have them at an 80 overall, and we project they will finish 2-10 with a 1-8 conference record. And after Arizona State at 15, we have the Houston Cougars. Now, Houston is very interesting to us. This past offseason, they made one of the more underrated acquisitions in obtaining Willie Fritz from Tulane to be their next head coach. And we think Fritz has been ready for this jump for a few years now. We think that is a remarkable hire for Houston. He's a pretty great recruiter, and you're putting him in a recruiting hotbed, so expect to see Houston's recruiting numbers steadily increase over the next few seasons. Now, unfortunately for the Cougars, this year we think they've lost too much firepower to be a legitimate threat in the conference. They're in full rebuild mode, which is what you hired Willie Fritz to do, but we have them at an 82 overall, and we project them to finish 3-9 with a 1-8 conference record. And at 14, we have the BYU Cougars. BYU is always an interesting team to cover under Kalani Sitake. They've been both very good and very bad at times, and they are usually very hard to predict, but we will do our best. Last year, BYU joined the Big 12, and it wasn't exactly easy goings. They started off pretty great, beating Arkansas, Cincinnati, and Texas Tech, and held an impressive 5-2 record through their first 7, then proceeded to lose their last 5 games in a row. And that was due in large part to Keaton Slovis going out with injury, and their backup Jake Retzlaff being pretty mediocre for the final 4 games of the season. Retzlaff returns as their projected starter this year, despite Sitake bringing in Gary Bohannon to compete for starting reps there. And it should be an interesting battle, but maybe not for the right reasons. If either guy play anything like Retzlaff did in the last 4 games of 2023, they could be in for a pretty rough season. And I think the fact that there's no clear starter kind of shows that they're both on the same level, which isn't great news if you're a BYU fan. We have them listed at an 82 overall, and we predict them going 3-9 with a 1-8 conference record. We just don't believe they will be built to make a great run in the Big 12 this year. And after BYU at 13, we have the Cincinnati Bearcats. Cincinnati is another team that's had to undergo a rebuild. They lost Luke Fickell to Wisconsin and brought in Scott Satterfield to replace him. And in his first season, they were pretty bad, but unlike the last couple teams, it seemed much less like an all-encompassing bad and more like a laying the foundation bad. Most notably, they had a very impressive rushing attack led by junior running back Corey Kiner, who returns this year. They were 25th in the country in rushing play percentage, but 7th in rushing yards per game. Very effective and crucial for them, seeing as they return their primary back and add a guy like Evan Pryor from Ohio State as their top rotator at the position. They also added Brendan Sorsby from Indiana to be their next quarterback, who should be a little bit better than Emory Jones was for them through the air, and about as good with his feet given the same amount of opportunity that Jones had last season. And overall, we have Cincinnati a little bit higher than the previous 3 teams. We have them at an 84, and we see them going 5-7 with a 2-7 conference record. Not great, but a step in the right direction for sure for Scott Satterfield. And at 12, we have the Colorado Buffaloes. Now, where to start with Colorado? I guess first, Deion brought in a lot of talent again this year. The roster looks pretty great all around, but then again, it did last year, and that ended up not meaning as much as I think anybody thought it would. So who really knows? In all seriousness, we think the move to the Big 12 will help Colorado out this year. They should immediately have one of the better offenses in the conference, which should help them out a lot, and they have a decent bit more talent on the defense coming into this season. Their biggest issue will come down to coaching. Colorado did not have a 4-8 roster last year, and they went 4-8. At some point, Deion Sanders and his staff are going to have to out-strategize their opponents instead of just hoping their players go out and rout them, which is something they showed they weren't the best at last year. Not saying they can't improve, but overall, not great. And with that said, we do see them improving this year. We have them at an 86.5 overall, and we have them finishing 6-6 with a 3-6 conference record. And after Colorado at 11, we have the TCU Horned Frogs. TCU was hit with injuries pretty bad last year, most notably their starting quarterback, Chandler Morris, went out with a knee injury that sent them on a 2-4 spiral to end the 2023 season. Josh Hoover took over as QB1 after Morris got hurt and did surprisingly okay for a redshirt freshman. And he's poised to take over as the leader of the Horned Frogs again this year. And most importantly, TCU adds some solid defensive talent to bolster that side of the ball that was overall much worse than the offense was last season. And we think that should dramatically change TCU's trajectory this year. The defense is really what held them back from being at least a couple games over where they finished last year. And overall, we have Sonny Dykes' squad rated as an 84.8 overall, and we see them going 7-5 with a 4-5 conference record. And at 10, we have the Baylor Bears. Now, Baylor's fall from grace has been hard to watch recently. The Bears went 3-9 in a dreadful display last year, but we still have faith in Dave Aranda, mainly because they'll have around 18 starters returning this year, and they add Group of 5 quarterback Daquan Finn, who was great last year for Toledo, and who should add stability and ability to a room that was decimated by injuries and mediocrity last year. The defense overall was pretty young, and while they probably won't be great this year as a unit, they should be able to take a big step forward, which is what we think will make the difference for them this year. We have Baylor rated as an 85 overall, and we see them finishing 6-6 with a 4-5 conference record this year. And following the Bears at 9, we have the UCF Knights. UCF ended 2023 very strong. They started off 3-5 through their first 8 games and finished 3-2 with some big wins in the conference to secure a bowl appearance, which is exactly what you would want to see in your first season in the Big 12. And Gus Malzahn, their head coach, is great. And where other teams like Houston, Cincinnati, and BYU struggled in their first seasons in the Big 12, Malzahn and UCF prove they can hang around, and they can do it right now. The offense is going to be really good once again this year. They returned key guys from last year in RJ Harvey, Kobe Hudson, and they add guys like Penny Boone, who was one of the best running backs in the Group of 5 last year, and KJ Jefferson, who, when healthy, is going to be a great fit at UCF. He fits the bill perfectly there. And the defense also wasn't awful last year, and they add some great additions through the portal, which is why they're rounded out as an 84.5 overall. And we see them going 7-5 with a 5-4 conference record. Pretty big improvement from last season, and pretty impressive all things considered. And at 8, we have the Kansas Jayhawks. Now, Lance Leipold is truly an enigma. Somehow, in just 3 years, he's brought Kansas out of the sewers of college football into a top contender in the Big 12. Even when it looked bleak for Kansas last year when Jalen Daniels went out with injury, their backup Jason Bean stepped in and was phenomenal. But Jalen Daniels returns this year, as do other key guys on the offense like Devin Neal, Luke Grimm, Lawrence Arnold, and Quentin Skinner. The offense should be great again this year, but the defense does lose some key talent, and while they won't be bad, they'll definitely have some blind spots to work through. We have Kansas rated out to an 86.6, and we have them finishing 8-4 with a 5-4 conference record. And at 7, we have the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Texas Tech was a team a lot of people were high on going into 2023, and they were a pretty fun dark horse Big 12 champion pick. But similarly to a few other teams on this list, injuries kept them from reaching their max potential last season. And this year, the Red Raiders are returning with Baron Morton as their starting quarterback, who we saw improvement in over the duration of his playing time last year. They also return a decent amount of production across the board, including running back Taj Brooks, who rushed for over 1,500 yards last year. They also add key depth on the left side of their offensive line and at their skill positions, which should help Morton out a ton this year. Overall, we have Texas Tech at an 85.1, and we have them finishing 8-4 with a 5-4 record in the conference in Joey McGuire's 3rd season as Texas Tech's head coach. And at 6, we have the Arizona Wildcats. Yes, Jed Fish left to take the head coaching gig at Washington. We do not blame him one bit, but he did leave Arizona in a pretty good spot, especially since new head coach Brent Brennan picked up right where he left off. Most importantly for Brennan, Noah Fafita returns for the Wildcats. He was a huge breakout star for them last year, and him choosing to stay is most likely what kept the team as a whole from imploding this offseason. Keeping Fafita was a huge win for Brennan, and likewise, the defense should be very strong once again this year. They do lose some guys to the portal and the draft, but they add just as much as they lose, which is why we have them rated as an 86.5 overall, and it's why we have them finishing 8-4 with a 5-4 conference record. Not bad at all for their first year in the Big 12. Definitely something to work with. And heading into the top 5, at 5, we have the Twitter champions, the West Virginia Mountaineers. Very big Twitter fan base, if you did not know. And they really turned the corner last year. They went from a middling Big 12 team to one of the better teams in the conference all around, and we think Neil Brown is just getting started. The offense returns several key starters in Garrett Green, who we believe will take another step forward this year, Jaheim White, Wyatt Millam, Brandon Yates, and Hudson Clement, who were also very big contributors for that offense last year. But the defense did take a pretty big hit. They lost guys like Mike Lockhart, Lee Pogba, and Beanie Bishop to the draft and the portal, but we're pretty confident that Neil Brown will be able to field a defense that is at least around as good as last year's with the talent that they retain. And we have the Mountaineers rated as an 86.8 overall. We see them finishing with a record of 8-4 while going 6-3 in the conference. And heading into the top row, the best of the best in the conference, at 4, we have the Iowa State Cyclones. Iowa State was a very young team last year and managed to do pretty great despite that. They knocked off teams like Oklahoma State, TCU, and Kansas State en route to a 7-6 finish in 2023. And the reason we have them this high is because since they were a young team, they are returning a ton of starters from last year, approximately 9 on offense and 9 on defense. And we think the shining light of the team is quarterback Rocco Becht. And other than having one of the best football names I've ever heard, he looked phenomenal in an Iowa State offense that looked average everywhere else. And Matt Campbell is no stranger to breaking out. They did it a few years ago before falling back to earth the past couple seasons. But we think with the additions they've made on the offensive line and skill positions, paired with the strength of the defense and the returning production all around, Iowa State could be even better than we think. We have them listed at an 86.4, and we have them finishing 9-3 with a 6-3 conference record. A big improvement from last year for a team that should be pretty great all around. And into the top 3, at 3, we have the Kansas State Wildcats. Now, Kansas State will be walking into their first full season under sophomore quarterback Avery Johnson, and while we haven't seen a lot from him, we believe he's going to be a pretty solid dual threat guy, much like Will Howard and Adrian Martinez were before him. And Chris Kleiman really doesn't have much to worry about. They don't lose an extraordinary amount of talent. They keep key contributors on the O-line and skill positions, and the defense returns important starters at every level. So simply put, the Wildcats ain't going nowhere. Under Chris Kleiman, they should be towards the top of the Big 12 for the foreseeable future. And we have them listed as an 87.4 overall, and we see them finishing with a 10-2 record 7-2 in the conference. And heading into the Big 12 championship teams, at number 2, we have the Utah Utes. Utah's heading into what looks like their final season under longtime head coach Kyle Whittingham, and we are predicting a valiant send-off for Whittingham. Funnily enough, we saw Utah as the Kansas State of the Pac-12, and now they're joining the Big 12 and essentially one-upping the Wildcats this year. They, like Kansas State, don't suffer from too many huge losses on either side of the ball, and they return Cam Rising from injury. And Rising is the biggest question mark for the Utes this year. Before missing the entire 2023 season, he was one of the better quarterbacks in the Pac-12, and we think he has the ability to recreate a season like 2022. It'll just be a matter, obviously, if he can stay healthy and if he can return to full form after what was a pretty major knee injury. Regardless, though, we think he will be much better than anything really that they had last year. And with all the talent surrounding Rising, it's not hard to believe that Utah is a top 2 team in the Big 12 this year. We have them listed at a 91 overall, and we have them finishing 11-1 with an 8-1 record in conference play. And that leaves us with the number 1 team, and we believe that will be the Oklahoma State Cowboys. To put it nicely, Oklahoma State was a pretty unique team last year. They started off pretty poorly by getting blown out versus South Alabama at home, followed by a loss to Iowa State to start their conference play. But Mike Gundy showed how truly valuable he is by getting the Cowboys turned around and miraculously propelling them to a Big 12 title berth. Man, I love college football. And the biggest reason we have Oklahoma State finishing first is because they returned 10 starters on both offense and defense. Of those, they returned the reigning Doak Walker Award winner Ollie Gordon, who is probably the best running back in the country. They returned 4 of their top 6 receivers from 2023, an insanely talented and deep offensive line, one of the fiercest linebacker tandems in the sport to go along with a very good secondary and defensive line. And really, it'll all fall on the quarterback, Alan Bowman, who, despite not having great numbers last year, should be pretty serviceable all around as long as he can keep the turnovers down. Overall, we have Oklahoma State rated at a 90 overall, and we see them finishing with the same record as Utah, 11-1, 8-1 in the conference, with an outright win over the Utes to give them sole position of first place in the Big 12 in 2024. And that's going to do it for the conference predictions. Let us know what you thought in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe. Go ahead and share with anybody you can think of. We appreciate it a lot. And like we said at the beginning of this video, be sure to stick around for the next upload. We will be talking about individual award winners. But that's going to do it for this video. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.